Hello, welcome to Academic Literacies. This is going to be a lecture on critical thinking. My name's Annalise Mitchell and I'm doing this lecture on behalf of Pauline Taylor. So this video is going to be a lot less formalised than my videos that I place on YouTube, as it is intended to be a lecture, and I'm just going to go through the slides with you, ensuring that you have an understanding of what's in the contents and that I explain them as clearly as possible. So the first thing that we need to look at in order to understand critical literacy is, how do you read? And why this question is important is when you go through a reading process to become a critical thinker, you need to have some way of reading a text so that you can understand its meaning and its underlying connotations as thoroughly as possible. So for the meantime, you need to think about, how do you read at the moment? What is your reading process? So there's a few here. The first one is that some of us scan from beginning to end without taking notes. Some of us go from beginning to end and make a summary at the end. Some of us go section by section, summarising key points in each section, so like each paragraph. Some of us go from beginning to end, highlighting key points and writing down questions as they come to mind and identifying the key points at the end. Or some of us start at the end to find out what the key idea of the reading is and then scan for key information that relates to it. I myself tend to go from, I tend to do D, which is going from beginning to end, highlighting key points and then writing down the questions as they come to my mind, like on the side, and identifying any key points at the end. That way I'm really thoroughly going through the process, and for me that's the most constructive way. Do you do any other way that hasn't been mentioned on this slide? There is probably a process, and everyone's got their own preferred style. Some people prefer just to read a text fully when they first start and then go back and critically analyse the text, so really it's just a matter of preference. Now, to become really good in a university and within any academic area, you need to be able to demonstrate your critical thinking through your writing. So that's why it's such a crucial area for you to understand. On this template here, which is what you'll see on a criteria sheet, as you can see, to achieve a high distinction, you need to demonstrate strong sentence and paragraph structure with references to literature and appendices. And what this means is that you need to have, your writing needs to be so succinct and demonstrates a very in-depth reading of literature and very strong sentence structures. Plus, the use of spelling, punctuation and grammar that has no errors. So all these things, and including referencing as well, so all these things tying together to achieve a very high standard of text. And I believe that when you get to the higher levels of grades within academia, you are demonstrating critical thinking, because you know the text so well that that's when you're really able to make a correlation between ideas, and you can really ascertain that the similarities and the comparisons between ideas, and you take the ideas further, which is really good. So what is critical thinking? Well, if you go to the Australian Curriculum website, which is also known as ACARA, you'll see a diagram that says critical and creative thinking, and it outlines all the ways that critical and creative thinking should be nurtured within not only schooling but in the university setting for teachers. So critical thinking is the ability to collect, analyse and evaluate information and ideas, and to solve problems by thinking clearly, critically and creatively. There you have it in a nutshell. It is not only to do with the idea of, critically evaluating somebody's argument, but critical thinking is also looked at as something that benefits people in thinking innovatively and creatively, so that you can think outside the square. You're not confined to a particular paradigm, or you're not just thinking conventionally or like everybody else. You can think in other ways, and that's what critical thinking is also about. And Einstein is often associated as one of the leaders in critical thinking, because not only was he a brilliant physicist, but he was also very philosophical, and he expanded himself in like a multitude of ways. And he says in this brilliant photo here, the person who reads too much and uses his brain too little will fall into lazy habits of thinking. So according to Einstein, it wasn't enough that you just read. You probably heard lots of people say, I read heaps. But yes, that is great. But the practice of critical thinking gets you to compare the text that you read and evaluate the underlying meanings and those kind of things. And that's what Einstein was referring to. So there is an expectation at university that you'll be able to discuss relevant topics at a more complex level, which in turn increases your chances of gaining employment in your field of expertise, such as teaching. From the very beginning, you are expected to think critically about the material you are using to present and to support your arguments and reflections on practice. So you're consistently being expected to substantiate what you say with evidence, theory, and your practice. And here you have again another template. This time it says the principles of critical thinking, and all these aspects of identifying, evaluating, identifying false logic and assumptions, presenting arguments, and as you can see, all the stars are here indicating that all these particular attributes are essential to critical thinking. So, without a doubt, critical thinking is important. I think we can establish that. And yes, Bloom's taxonomy for thinking, which is very valuable in understanding the levels of thought that individuals go through when they read a text. And as you can see, we all start off at basic knowledge, being able to recall facts, and that usually happens at the very beginning of a text. You can just recall the information you're reading. Then you move to understanding, which is comprehending. Then to using knowledge in new situations, which is applying the knowledge. Then breaking things down into critically thinking, which is analysing your text. Then, when you've really mastered the analysis, that's only when you can synthesize and evaluate. Because synthesizing means putting things together, which is creatively thinking. So once you really know a text and you really understand the concepts, that's when you can branch it out into new areas. That's what the synthesis is. And then at the very end is evaluation, where you're able to make judgments based on basically the whole table. So evaluation is the pinnacle, followed by synthesis and analysis and critical thinking. So what are the benefits of applying critical thinking? Well, number one, there's a high potential to assist in creative thinking. That's like we said before. Strategies of thinking may be discipline-specific, however, skills are transferable and increases your ability to find new and creative solutions or answers to problems. It is a foundation for creative and innovative thinking. And that's what a lot of commentators, from entrepreneurs to academics to a whole multitude of people in the 21st century, are saying that these two ones here, creative and innovative thinking, are the most crucial aspects for individuals to nurture and develop, because if we have these skills in the 21st century, we're much more likely to thrive and be contributors, active contributors to the workforce and to the community. What else does critical thinking enable you to do? Well, it enables you to learn more effectively. Learning at university is active, as I've said probably quite a few times. It is not just about what is learned, which is your content, but how you learn it, which is your learning skills that you acquire through your journey. When you encounter ideas, you need to do more than just note them. You need to engage with them. which is essential because, and you'll notice this yourself, when you really engage with the text, you start to take it on and it becomes part of your meaning structure. And that's when you're able to, only then are you able to analyse it and critically evaluate it. What else does critical thinking enable you to do? Well, it enables you to communicate your ideas more effectively. So to get high results, you need to do more than just write your ideas. You need to write them to academic standards, and that's what that criteria sheet was about before. Not only are you, when you critically evaluate a text, you need to be able to communicate that to your readers so that they can understand the clarity of your argument. This means that concise responses that have increased scope and better quality of ideas, and then engage with ideas rather than merely state what ideas are there. You'll be better prepared for discussion groups. You can avoid silencing other group members, explain your assumptions, and debate contemporary issues and arguments. And that's a really good point. I think the more you critically evaluate texts and ideas, the more it actually starts to, you start to realise that you need to hear other people's opinions just as much as your own and come to a informed, conclusion. And so that's one of the real benefits of critical thinking. It makes you a really understanding and non-judgmental individual, where you're able to look at multitudes of viewpoints and then come up to some kind of opinion. Yep. So again, we have Einstein, and he says, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And this is really paramount to, I think, the purpose of university and in a more smaller scale, just reading in general. When you really understand something, you can explain it in simple words, where you'll notice when an individual doesn't really understand something well, or even yourself, you'll use words that don't really meld together and can sometimes confuse yourself even and other people because you don't really understand it as fully as you could. So to articulate yourself clearly, you need to be both fluent, which is highlighted in yellow here, and coherent, meaning that it's really smooth and it sounds to the listener like you really know what you're talking about. And you having joints or jointed segments, so the way it sits together within the sentence. And it's clear, distinct, again, forming a joint. So all these aspects make your sentences clear and flow nicely, basically. So, how do you build your conceptual understanding? And can you identify, engage with, challenge, and organise your ideas? These are the questions that you need to ask yourself at this stage. So how do you build your understanding of your concepts? Obviously through thorough reading and through writing over time. Can you identify, engage with, and challenge and organise ideas? This will develop, of course, over time, but it's essential that you start developing these skills as you progress further in your university career. And a lot of you would have already developed these skills where you've identified ideas and you engage with them and you challenge them, which is great. I see this on the discussion boards. It's fantastic. Some of you are challenging the ideas. You're not belittling them. You're just, coming up with, your own arguments, or you're giving examples from your own experience, and you're challenging some of the discourses that are out there. And you're also organising your ideas, which is great. So, evaluating information using critical thinking. What's essential that I think one of the reasons university education is so essential is that comprehension alone is not enough. You need to be able to evaluate the information, otherwise you will not fully understand it. How does it fit with a specific question or topic, the focus of the task or subject? Your ability to evaluate information is seen in how effectively you apply and incorporate the ideas of other authors in your writing. So it's how you meld all those other ideas, whatever you've read, even the things that you've observed in the classroom or throughout your lifetime, and how you meld those within your writing to form a coherent picture of your argument, basically. And this student here has done that very well. As you can see, they've got ticks all over the place from the marker and a double tick at the end. The double tick always signifies, yes, this is great. You've really succinctly written your argument and your ideas have come through so well that the lecturer, teacher is impressed. And I'll let you read that in your own time, but this argument is very succinct. So there are two types of ways of evaluating information using critical thinking, and you've probably heard of these already. We'll come across the concepts. First one is inductive thinking, and the second one is deductive thinking. So inductive thinking is also known as bottom-up thinking. As you can see through the triangle, you've got the bottom there going up. It's reaching a conclusion based on observations by building and connecting ideas to identify the core conclusion. So you reach a conclusion based on what you observe by building and connecting the ideas to identify a core conclusion. As you can see, you come to a conclusion after your observations. Where the deductive thinking is top-down thinking. So you've got the bottom of your triangle at the top there going down. You're reaching a conclusion by narrowing the range of ideas to identify the core conclusion. So after you've got all your ideas, then you narrow it down to what is the core conclusion. And that there becomes like your thesis statement, really, your central argument, or the central argument of the individual that you're reading. So a little bit more information on inductive thinking. Questions to ask yourself when you read. What specific information do you have? What connections or patterns can you find? What general conclusions or predictions can you make? And when can you get more information? And do you need to change your general conclusions or predictions? So, what could this look like? Here you have a text that you're reading in any standard academic journal, and you have your paragraphs, and in the text here it says conclusion, how do these ideas fit together? So you've read all the paragraphs, you've looked at what conclusions can you make from each of these paragraphs, and you ask yourself, do I need more information to strengthen my conclusion? So once you've read all this, you ascertain whether you need more information. And that's in the research process. You'll find that you'll get to a stage where you'll say, I have all the information I need to argue what my conclusion is. And there'll be this point in time where you'll feel just right. You'll say, yep, I've got all this research and I now know that I've got enough here to argue what I want to argue. So deductive thinking, it's again a little bit different. You've got the questions that you need to ask yourself. What specific topic are you studying? What general information do you already have that might help you understand the specific topic? Are you sure the general information applies to the specific topic that you're studying? And if it does, how did the general information help you understand the specific topic? So, what does this look like? As you go through the paragraphs, you ask yourself, how does this fit with what I already know? So this is, in your research process where you start to go, okay, I'm reading this. Is there anything here that I need to further validate my argument? How does it fit with what I already am arguing? Does it fit at all? Is there any correlation, or is there anything about it that I can include? And you ask yourself, are your ideas supported or challenged by this text? Okay, so it says read the summary conclusion first. What is the specific topic? What do I already know about it? There you go. This is another good way of reading, and I've used this before, where you get, like, say, a journal article. You write what their main argument is, what you think it is. Then you put dot points of what the argument is. So what arguments that you find, or points or ideas as you're reading the text. And you even quote directly from the source. So you could summarize here and then quote directly. And that's what I would do. I'd actually use quotation marks, write it out, then put the page number. And that way you can use it for your journal writing. As you become more and more advanced, you probably will move away from this kind of template, but I would start at first doing this because it gets you into the habit of looking for all these things, and then eventually you won't need to use it. So what is good to ask now is, what other reading strategies have you used or heard about? And what strategy can you use this week? So will you start using this template? Will you start using any of the other ways of analysing text that we've talked about so far? Very interesting. And here are some helpful links that have been attached for you to look at. You've probably all been to learning skills that are provided by JCU, and there's a module as well that you can access. So now we're moving to Module 2, which is the lecture that was done for this subject. And I'm again going to go reading through it and giving just some clarity on the ideas. So the learning outcomes for Module 2 is to distinguish the difference between looking at and observing teaching practice. As you can see, this is a lot more succinct than the learning outcomes that I provided on the video that's on YouTube for Module 2. This is, again, it's a lecture, and it's not as the video that I put on YouTube, it was more in line with the learning guide. So let's go. So according to Borich, your ability to perceive what is happening in a classroom will be critical to your success as a teacher. And that I can't emphasize enough. It is your perception of what's going on, and obviously you will develop this now through your ability to observe. It'll basically enable you as a teacher to be really aware of your surroundings. I don't think students ever realise how much a teacher has training in this, that you can see everything. A lack of a professional frame or lens leaves our observations open to selective perception, contradictory explanations, and false expectations. And that is true. Like, when you have a professional frame of reference, which is your what you acquire through your academic experience at university and through your professional experiences, and observing your prac teachers during your practicums, you'll acquire a knowledge of human behaviour, the dynamics of a classroom and all those things, and it'll basically make you much more aware of how you can selectively perceive things and or come up with contradictory explanations, which is, that something else was at fault, or that, you may even sometimes blame yourself, but there's a whole bunch of factors inside a classroom that is involved to making it operate effectively. And you'll over time develop a knowledge of that there's a lot of room for just all sorts of dynamics to happen in a classroom. So observation. Observation is used on professional experience to collect accurate and detailed data to build profiles of your class and individual learners, and to identify your SBT teaching practice and to reflect on your own teaching practice. So the observation that you're now about to go through is in your simulated classroom setting is going to be a great exercise to show you all the factors that you should be looking for when you go into a classroom and you observe the teacher and the students. And this is from your guide that you're going to be using during your Profex. And as you see, there's a whole bunch of activities You'll be doing a whole class profile, individual learner profiles. You'll be observing the lesson structure, observing classroom management, observing teaching strategies, and observing student engagement. And see, all these things come into being when you're a teacher. And once you understand all these areas and you've had experience in observing them and even doing them yourself, you'll become very effective as a teacher, because you'll understand that all these dynamics are at play when you're teaching. So for some self-improvement, and that's what critical reflection is all about, is improving your teaching practice. You'll be aware of your own behaviour and how much that influences how your students react. You'll discover alternatives to all sorts of scenarios that you'll be put in, because there'll be a whole bunch of things that'll happen that you'll be like, whoa, where did that come from? And it'll challenge you, but you'll also learn that other teachers have gone through it and that there are other ways of handling it. You'll determine your strengths, so what you're really good at. And there was clearly things that when I was teaching in the classroom that I was really good at, and things that I wasn't as so good in. And you'll determine what are your strengths and really harness those. And lastly here, you'll focus on teacher effectiveness. So this is the essence, what makes an effective teacher, and those are the things that you'll focus on whenever you're in a classroom. So there are 8 lenses for classroom observation. So if you look at the lenses, there are ways of looking at a classroom. So when you're sitting down watching a teacher teach, or if you were like a little bird in a room watching yourself teach, you'd be looking at the learning climate. So how does it feel in the classroom? The classroom management techniques used by the teacher. The lesson clarity. So is the lesson's outcomes or the purpose of the lesson being clarified to the students clearly? Is there instructional variety? Are students getting a variety of activities? Is the task orientation appropriate? Is it formatted, or is the lesson formatted in such a way that it makes sense to the students? Are the students actively engaged, or are they passive? Are they getting bored, or are they amused? All those things. Are the students able to experience any success through that lesson? And lastly, any higher thought processes are happening within the lesson. Now clearly, each one of these are going to happen to various degrees in each lesson, and sometimes you may feel as if you're not hitting on some of them, but as time goes by, you'll be aware that you more likely are, but it's just at first it's difficult to see. So it's up to you to choose a useful lens when you're observing. The difference between just looking at an event and carefully observing it is in the structure an observer brings to the observation. So those previous lenses that we just looked at are the types that you can apply when you're observing, and they will all give you different things to focus on. So observation depends on the context of the lesson, what useful lens you're using, which is the learning climate, classroom management, lesson clarity, instructional variety, task orientation, student engagement, and student success. And lastly, higher thought processes. And this is a table to compare your data. So if you're using no lens and using an identified and purposeful lens. And if you were to use a table like this, how you would examine a classroom environment. So in the tutorial this week, you'll need to remember that tasks 1 and 2 must be completed by Wednesday, 9 a.m. Task 1 is to be submitted through Safe Assignment. Task 2 is a quiz in week 2 work. A not-so-pop quiz on glossary terms is also available, and you'll be doing a reflection of observation and inference in your personal journal. Okay, so that concludes today the lecture presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me, and I can answer any questions on this lecture, and I'll post this up onto Learn JCU. Thank you very much for listening. Bye for now.